Yo, what's
Yo,
up? I'm Adam,
and I'm Patrick.
and we are excited to be here with you today. We are going to be talking about what is Power BI doing to your database. We talk about this a lot, right, Patrick?
A lot. We talk about this
Oh,
a lot
all
with a lot
right.
of people. With a lot of
Yep.
people.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
So, and thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much for participating in Past Summit. It is,
Yes.
we wish we could be there in person with everyone. We love Pass. We've been working with Pass for a long time. And so hopefully next year it's better. But thank you for hanging out with us today live. A couple of housekeeping things. Let's see. Here we go. Just be sure there's a lot of stuff going on. Even as a digital event, there are a lot of things you can participate in and hang out with folks and, just participate even beyond this summit as well. Virtual groups and whatnot are still meeting. SQL Saturdays are still happening online. So explore Pass. Just make sure you take advantage of the entire event as we go through. Also, after we're done, be sure to fill out that session evaluation. It is really important both for the conference and for Patrick and I as speakers. We definitely look at this feedback and we use that to help improve our presentations. Just really quick, a little bit about us. If you're not familiar, we are PMs on the Power BI product team, working on the customer arm called the Customer Advisory Team or the CAT team. If you're not familiar with that, we work with the world's largest customers using Power BI. We see all sorts of gnarly stuff, pushing Power BI to the limits, seeing what we can do, figuring out guidance and best practices, and then sharing that out with everyone in sessions like this. And we've been working with Power BI before it was Power BI back in the analysis services, reporting services days. So we've been around this for a long time and have seen a lot of things. And then what we're going to go over here. So we're going to look at how Power BI actually interacts with your database, talking about how to keep it up to date, freshness, performance, all of those things that come into play, and then what you can do to kind of help in those scenarios, things that you can actively go do to improve performance, make it respond a little better, and everything else. So in terms of questions, we're going to hold questions till the end just because we have a flow for this talk, and doing questions in the middle is going to kind of interrupt that. So be sure that you're adding your questions. If you do have those, we'll get to as many as we can at the end. As well, you can favorite those items and get them bubbled up to the top. So if more people like a given question, we'll start with those. The other thing I just want to do from a housekeeping perspective is any Power BI announcements that you're expecting today that haven't been announced yet, we are not going to entertain questions on that at all. So if you have questions about Power BI premium per user or other stuff that's potentially coming out, we are not going to talk about that in this session. Try and keep your questions related to the topic at hand. All right, with that, Patrick, are you ready?
Yes. Let's go.
Let's do this.
Let's do
All
it.
right. So, when we talk about Power BI working with your database, there are a couple stages of data analysis, or like we say, chaos, right?
Yes.
So the three stages we're going to go through here is before it's hitting the fan. The fan, I think everyone knows the fan very well. We're going to look at, okay, it's hitting the fan now, and then afterwards, like, okay, what do we do after it hit the fan? Like, what can we do to help this even more? All right, so let's look at, okay, it's before it's hit the fan. What do we actually go do? And so here it all starts with import, right? So Patrick, I've got a scenario here where I wanted to get this going, but you know, refresh is a thing,
Yeah.
and so my issue here is it's slow, right? This thing is slow. What do you actually like? I expected this to be fast, right?
Yeah. So,
This should just work.
but let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How did you get access to this data? How did you get access? Who gave you access? Why are you accessing my database? I need to know why, and then why so much data? Why are you importing all my data from my database? Where's this data going? I need to know. Are you taking this data from our on-premises protected VNet? Because we have some personally identifiable data in there, but what are you doing? Adam, what are you doing to my data? What are you doing with it? I just need to know these things.
I don't understand.
What do you mean?
So look, I just went exploring. I found this Power BI thing. I downloaded it. Was free, right? So I downloaded it. I built a report, and I started with just a small data. I just had this Excel file. I pulled that in, created something for my boss, and they loved it. They went bananas, and they wanted more. And so I just went out and I said, look, let's just. I found this. I went to SharePoint, right, and I found this password sitting out there for a database. So I used it because, if it's on SharePoint in our intranet, it should be usable, right?
Let me guess.
I just did that.
Let me guess. The username was SA.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. Can't do this. Can't do this. Let me show you. Let me show you something. I'm going to share my screen just for 1 second, right?
All right.
Just for 1 second. And so I want to show you actually what's happening when you do this. And so I have you sent me this this model that you created.
I did. I sent it over to you.
And you connected out to our data
really
warehouse.
Slow.
It's really slow. You connected out to our data warehouse.
Are you going to share it?
Oh, got to click that share button. Golly, got to click that share button.
It's all right. You're just a DBA. You don't.
I am just a DBA. Can you see my screen now?
I can.
All right. So you connected to my data warehouse, and you connected to all the dimensions.
Right.
And this fact online sales table. This fact online sales table has a lot of data in it.
I know, it was great.
But when you click, I'm assuming you're going to do this. You're just going to click refresh. Yeah. So when you click refresh, what's going to happen is this is going to reach back to my database and query the tables, and it's going to start importing the data into on your desktop, or are you pushing this somewhere else? You never answered that question for me.
Well, I mean, eventually it goes, up into the cloud thing, right?
The cloud. Oh my God. What do you? Okay. So you got to be careful when you do this, Adam. We got to come up with a better way. And maybe we could talk about some techniques, because it will be slow, right? The smaller tables, you can see the smaller tables, they're okay, right? 28 rows, 18,000 rows. That's easy. And I'm sure you were like, that's pretty fast. But if I go down here to this guy, this one right here, right? Yeah. That was just taking a long time, because
a long time. Yeah. That's why I'm calling you.
There's hundreds of millions of rows in this table. We're getting close to, I think, like 1 billion rows in this table. Did you just do a select star? Is it just every column? You don't even know. Do you?
There was a little dialogue. I put a checkbox next to it and then hit load.
Oh my God. Okay. Adam, we can't do that. You cannot do that, man. You can't do that. So we're not going to do that. All right. We're not going to do this import. You saw I canceled it because this would take all day to do. And so we need to think about some techniques, some things that we should do. If we can't come up with a better approach to just fully importing the data like you were doing, we need to come up with some things that we could do to improve the import, on the back end database, right? Like indexing, indexing. I'm sure you've heard of indexing.
That's all stuff you as a DBA are going to do for
Absolutely.
me, right?
You will not be responsible for any of this. We can do some indexing. We can create materialized views or index views. We can even replicate the database. There's features in SQL Server like always on, or if you're using Azure SQL, you can have availability groups. I forget the actual technical term for it in Azure SQL. We can do things on the back end, so you're not hitting the operational database. Or what we're doing in our organization, we have a data warehouse, and then we can do some things in our data warehouse to make.
So you have a specific database for reporting purposes. You're not going against the main.
Yes.
But I need to go against the main one because that's where the recent data is.
Oh my God.
Right.
Okay. All right. So you need real-time data?
I mean, why not?
So we're going to negotiate. Adam. As we go through this talk, you and I will do some negotiation, because I don't think you need real-time data. I don't, right? I'm going to talk to my manager about you and this real-time data, and you and I will negotiate. Like if I'm a car salesman, you'll say, I need this, and I'll say, no, you need that. Okay.
It's funny you mentioned you were going to talk to your manager, because when I talked to my manager, they said they needed it like immediately.
So your people need to talk to my people because
Okay.
we gotta fix this.
All right. So one other thing I put in this slide as well, there's a link out on the Power BI documentation site in the guidance section. There is an item there about just data reduction and reducing the amount of data that you're importing.
Yeah.
We see stuff with that all the time, talking to customers where, they just have, a ton of data. They do literally that. They put the checkbox next to the fact table and all the dimensions and then just say load. They don't transform anything. They just pull it all in, not even understanding what is in their data. One example, like you can use tools like Tabular Editor, where it runs like some best practice analysis. We had a customer where we ran that against their model, and there was something like over 2,000 unused columns that it called out.
Unused columns. Unused columns.
Don't bring that in.
Crazy. Yeah.
Right? That's just bloating the data. So definitely check that document. It's very helpful in terms of how you're actually going to go about that, and reduce that data. And reducing that data also, not only does it help with the complexity of your model, it will also increase the time that it takes, or it will actually help the time of refresh, right? So it'll make it go faster, right? Because you're not pulling in as much data.
That's right.
And then the more you reduce that complexity, just the faster things are going to go.
So Adam, I was out reading. After you showed me this, I took some time and I went out and I was reading about this Power BI because I'm just a DBA, right? My job is to make sure the data is available. I don't do reporting or anything like that unless I'm reporting against, metrics for my databases. And so I went and did some reading. I went out to powerbi.com or Docs, the Microsoft Docs page, and I read there's a feature called Incremental Refresh.
Oh.
There's a feature called Incremental Refresh, and you may want to consider this if this is an option, because your data, we could get things to refresh faster, it's more reliable, and guess what? It won't consume as much resources on my backend database. Yeah. So
nice.
let's head over to my laptop. Head over to my laptop, because I want to show you how we could set this up and talk you through this, because I want to make sure, I want to see if this will fit. And I need to check my database also, because I need to check my database, see if this will fit. I kind of mocked up something here. And so what you can do is when you bring your data in, and I'm waiting for this to load up. Yeah, here we go. Bring the query editor over here. So when you bring your data in, you would create these two parameters. So you see over here, I created two parameters. If you don't know how to create parameters in Power BI Desktop, and the query editor is pretty simple. You just go to manage parameters and choose new parameter. So you create these two date time parameters. So the first requirement is you need to have some type of date on this large table. And I got to go
many dates.
Yeah, I got to go look at ours to see if it fits this scenario. And so once you identify that date, you go to that table, and then you can see I have a date key right here. And if you have a surrogate key, you can work through it. You'll have to create a custom function if you're using, and what I mean by the surrogate key, if you've transformed your date into an integer, okay? And so if you have that, there's ways that you can get around that. But what you would do is on that date, you click the drop down, you choose datetime filters, and you choose custom. And then this little dialog will pop up. And on this dialog, you would choose, I'm going to zoom in on this, after equal and before is before. And then you could select those parameters that we created. And it should look something like this. Okay. Nice. Make sure you don't put equal on both sides, but because that can produce duplicates across what we're creating is called partitions. Okay. And I'll show you how we get to that point in a little bit. And if you get these duplicates, you could get an error during the refresh, right?
So partitions are kind of like just slices of the pie.
It's like slices of the pie.
Like a pie chart.
No, not like a pie chart. But you should always use pie charts in every report.
Yes, pie chart, all the things.
Or donut, a pie with a hole in it. Anyway,
there you go.
I digress. But I'm a DBA. I know visualization best practices. Okay. And so do this, and you got to be careful because you need to make sure that the data source that you are connecting to supports query folding. So incremental refresh does not work on every source. To get an indication of whether or not it's actually folding back, if you go over here into the applied steps, you'll see, source navigation, but go to your filter step And if you right click on it, there's a little button right here. It may be enabled. Just because it's disabled doesn't mean query folding is not happening. But if it is enabled, that's a very good indication that it is. So if I go here, choose view native query.
What is that query folding thing you speak of?
Great question. And so what you'll see here is when I added that filter, my initial query is just this part, the top part right here. It's just this, the initial query. And I can see where you chose every column in the database. You
just
didn't
did everything.
Yeah, you don't need some of these columns here at the bottom. But anyway, but what will happen with the query folding, when I add those additional steps, it'll just start to build the query out. So it takes the base query and it starts adding the other steps to it. And there's certain things that won't fold, but you need to make sure this folds. Okay, you need to make sure. And there's, like I said, data sources that don't support this. But if you do, it should absolutely work.
So query folding is kind of like it does like query squishing, right?
Query squishing. Yeah, query squishing. That's a very technical term.
Where it takes all of those transformations and just kind of blends them into one, squishes them into one query.
Squishes them into one query. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So once you're done, you click close and apply. It'll bring you back to the desktop. And then what you need to do is go here and choose incremental refresh. Okay. And you may get a warning. Remember I said we got that warning yesterday, and so it's in the slides. I fixed it. It's not showing that warning.
Good job.
And so you set this up. And so you choose a table that you want to set incremental refresh on. And then you choose the number of months you want to keep, or number of years, or number of quarters that you want to keep in the entire model. Okay. And then you say, okay, I want to refresh the last 12 months, or the last month, or the last day, or the last week. And so I can do this. So I can change this. Hey, I know we have 13 years worth of data. So we want to keep 13 years, but we only want to refresh the last day.
So this is what helps define those pie slices or partitions that you talked about?
Yes. So in our case, we would have, 13 years, 13 partitions. And Power BI does some really smart things on the back end for completed periods. It'll expand them and roll them based on completed periods. And so right here, when I initially published this, so this is something you need to know though, when I initially published this out, it's going to run and bring in data for 13 years and 12 days. So it's going to take a bit.
The first time it's going to do the whole thing.
Yes. The first time it's got to do the whole thing. All subsequent runs are just going to fall in this bucket right here. It's just going to refresh the last 12 days. There's some other options, which are a little beyond the scope of this session, but just to get us started with an incremental refresh, this is something we can consider if our people meet and go, you know what, we really don't need real-time data. We can refresh this, maybe 4 times a day, because we're only refreshing the last 12 days, or maybe 8 times a day. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. All right.
I'm not so sure about that, but so a couple other things with incremental refresh just to be aware of is like if this the dialogue that Patrick showed you, if it's not like allowing you to enable it or not, those range start regions have to be applied to a date time column, not just a date column.
Yeah, that's right.
So be aware of that. Another limitation as well is make sure once you use incremental refresh, it's going to restrict your ability to re-download that Power BI desktop file. So be aware of that. That is a potential, you can still work with it, but just know that that's going to impact your item. And Patrick and I always talk about, reducing data silos and separating the report from the data set. If you're using incremental refresh as a pro user, your options are limited to re-update that. If you're on the premium side, you can use the XMLA endpoint and just model your data like you would analysis services at that point.
I'm going to say this, right? I have to say this, Adam. So it is a downside, right? People look at, I can't download my PBIX file as a limitation to what we're doing. I don't look at it that way, because if you think about, if you're in an enterprise where you're developing out an enterprise business intelligence solution, obviously if you're working with this volume of data, you're working at a very large corporation or working on a big project. And so if I was using some other tool to store my data, should people download some model, they should use another tool. And that's why we expose that XMLA endpoint. So you can do some enterprise modeling. You can do things like schema only deployments and maintain it, put it under version control. So while a lot of people go, oh, it's so bad, I can't download my PBIX file. Not that bad, because if you live connect to that model and you build all your reports live connected, you can do whatever you want with those PBIX files. It's just a PBIX file that contains that model. Manage that a different way, right? Manage that in an enterprise manner, as opposed to thinking about it as this siloed data model. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah. So you may be using a data source also where, look, it doesn't support query folding. So you're not going to be able to use incremental refresh, and you're still pulling in a ton of data. So that's something to be aware of as well, that this may not be an option for you.
Yep.
So in our case, we're going to pretend like, Patrick.
It doesn't work I did some checking, Adam. I went and I did some checking. This ain't going to work for us. This ain't going to work. My database don't work that way. And there's going to be a lot of DBAs out there where they're going to go, my database doesn't work this way. And so we got to come up with something else. Adam. So what do we got? Yeah.
So now we go, look, it's hitting the fan now. Like something's bad's going on. My DBA couldn't help me out here, and my manager's yelling at me. I got to get this going, right?
Yeah.
So, let's see what this is. So look, Patrick, I did some research, and so I'm just going to use this thing called direct query.
Wait a minute.
It'll be great.
Wait a minute, Adam. Wait a minute. So can you what is this? What is this direct query? Can you tell me about it?
All right. So let's look and compare and contrast this whole idea of import versus direct query. So when we import data, right? So we've got our database out there. This is what you control, Patrick, as a DBA. You've provided that to us. And when we use import, what happens with Power BI is we're actually going to make a copy of the data.
Yeah.
And then that gets moved and stored inside of Power BI, inside of that data set, right? And so we have to refresh that data to go get that copy back. And then the queries are actually going to go, this is cache data in the data set. And then whenever I work with the reports, those are actually just going to query that cache set of data and not send those queries directly back to the database. Whenever I refresh, that's when it's going to go back to the database.
So I did talk to my people, and they said it's okay if we cache data. They did say it's okay if we cache data and refresh it every now and then.
Yeah, but the problem is it takes so long that it's not meeting our business needs. And so that's why I want to go to direct query. I'm just going to direct query the whole thing, and we'll go that way. This will work much better. The word
direct kind of scares me a little bit, Adam.
So, this slide should say direct query, not import, but let me walk through what direct query is actually going to do. Pretend that import here says direct query. My apologies there. I don't mean to confuse you, Patrick. And so what this will do is this will actually grab the schema of the database. So it doesn't actually grab the actual data. So we're just grabbing the schema. The schema is stored locally inside of Power BI. So that we can work with and know what the columns are, know what the relationships are. But when we actually go and interact with a visual or do anything like that, it's actually going to go query the backend database.
Can you wait? Oh, whoa, wait a minute.
So you'll see like these SQL statements that'll get run on the database for your actual reports. It's great.
Oh.
Every time that report's rendered, it's going to go back and get that data. So that means we can get the actual data that's in the database. We don't have to wait for this whole refresh.
Is that some T-SQL that it generates?
Yes, it's auto-generated SQL, which we all know is the best SQL.
Okay. All right.
Auto-generated SQL is the best.
I see a bullet that you kind of went over. It says one or more queries per visual.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So is it one per visual? Is it one or more per visual? I'm a little confused.
My understanding is it's one or more per visual.
So if I have a bar chart, column chart, it could be one query or it could be multiple.
It could be multiple. Yeah.
Okay,
but that's okay, right? Your database is fast. So it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, but if I have 10 people doing this and you have 20 visuals, let's say there's just one per. That's 200 queries for 20 people. And I know at the company we work at, there's lots of people. And so if you did something like this, the magnitude, oh, okay. Let's see this. Let's see what you got, Adam. Let's see what you're doing.
But also like the comment you're making, I'm kind of confused. Can't you just make it bigger? Like the database.
I can, but it's not free. It's not free to just make it bigger.
I don't have to pay for it.
Oh, okay. Let's see this. Okay, come on, man. Let's see what you got.
So I'll just show you here. I'm going to go to my report. I'm going to go to my report page, and bam, there it is. Like, look, it's running, and it's going to come up at.
What's all those little spinny?
Well, it's actually going out to the database and waiting for the results. Look at that. Look, it's coming back and getting the data.
What?
And I don't know why it's taking so long.
Okay,
so you should fix that.
So, okay, I should fix that.
Yeah, make it go faster.
Make it go faster. So while you were out doing this, because I'm a DBA, and this is what DBAs do, we learn stuff. Yeah. We look under the covers. Go ahead.
One thing I'll also add, though, is this was much faster than waiting for the refresh to happen for the imported data.
Get it. But I want to show you something. So I took some time. While you were talking and doing, that's why I kept asking all these questions, because I was actually building a monitor for my database, okay? Using, guess what? Power BI, because it just works. It's so easy. It's so easy to do these things inside of Power BI. Nice. So let me show you what I built, but I'm going to ask you to do a refresh. While I show this. So I built this little query monitor tool, right? And it's using some DMVs in my data warehouse. Look at that, right? And so I want you to refresh your report, and let's see what happens to my monitor. So we're starting with 33 queries here.
Yep. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go and refresh that.
So I got this
refreshing.
It's refreshing. This auto refresh that runs over here, and my little monitor is not picking up. Is it still running?
Oh, there it is. I just saw it move from. Oh, look at that! Active sessions is going up.
There it goes. Active sessions are going up. Takes a little bit. Oh, look at the active session. So it's just constantly going up. Constantly executed queries. They're slow. There we go. So there we go. Look at that. So look at that. Look what you're doing to my database, man. Just you. That's just you. But that's just you doing that to my database.
That's Adam. Why we have the database, though, to be used, right?
Okay, so oh my God, it's still going up. It's like a straight line up. Okay, so we gotta come up with something else here, Adam. I don't know if this is gonna work, my friend, because we went from 33 executed queries, and you just click, and it's still going up.
Another user came in and is using the report.
Look at that. Look at this. It's just going, because you have this report deployed out, I guess, right? And you shared it with someone. Yeah. Okay, so we got to do something better, Adam. We got to do something better. Okay. We can't do this. So Power BI is really, if you spend some time and optimize this, and Adam and I are joking and kidding about this, right? And so we're not making light of direct query, but be aware that direct query can really, really hammer your database, especially if you design this beautiful report like Adam designed here that's scrolling. It's scrolling.
Yeah, look at these tooltips too. It's amazing information that I've got on each visual.
Okay, right? Adam.
This is great.
Let's talk about your report a little bit. Let's talk about this. So you're still using my database, but I heard about this. You told me about this other feature, and I haven't had a chance to really dig into it. I think it was called Composite something.
Oh, wait. Before we get to that.
Okay.
Let's talk about a few things here. Like what can we do from a direct query perspective, right?
Yeah.
So again, the thing to understand about direct query is that the storage engine concept of where the data is, right. We've moved that burden from Power BI to the actual data source.
Yep.
Right. So the burden of performance and responsiveness is now on the database side of this equation.
Yep.
Regardless of what the database is. This could be SQL Server, it could be some other database as well. Regardless of what you're doing, that we're now saying that has to respond fast. I don't know how many times we've had conversations with customers where they want to do 100% direct query, and I get it, right? They've spent a lot of money on this infrastructure that they're paying for to house that data. They want to use that infrastructure and not move the data to somewhere else and copying that data, putting it somewhere else and making this go. But like I said, that burden of performance is on there, and they're like, no, my database is fast.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but you're calling me and you're saying that the report's not performing well. There are tools you can use to go discover that. So like Performance Analyzer in Power BI Desktop is a
Yep.
great way to just get a window. Actually, let me show that real quick.
Yeah, let's show that. That'd be a good idea.
So if I go to View and then I go to Performance Analyzer, the one thing with Performance Analyzer is make sure that you click this Start Recording button, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're like me, you always go to that report page and you never hit Start Recording, and it didn't actually start grabbing anything. One thing to also understand is there's two caches in play here. One is a visual cache and the other is this data cache.
Yep.
But I'm just to illustrate this, I'm just going to start recording and I'm going to hit refresh again. And then you'll see as this information goes and we're actually working with the data, you will actually get information back about those visuals, right? And so now every visual that's on here, look at this. Look at this.
It's like little ants running all over the place.
Little ants. Look at that. Look at that. Look at this one. This is in milliseconds, so it took like over 10 seconds to run.
Wow.
And so if we expand that, then you're going to see a couple things here where you're going to see the direct query. This is how long it took to get the database back. Wow. You're going to notice that the Dax query took almost the same amount of time because it's actually the Dax query is actually what's executing that direct query. So it has to wait for that to return, then it can do its thing. Right?
So can we see? Can you show me? I see a thing copy query right there.
Yeah.
Can you like copy that and open a notepad or something so I can actually see what's going on right there?
Yeah. Hang on.
As a DBA, I'm curious. Whoa.
All right. So this is the Dax part, and then here's the SQL query underneath, right?
Wow.
So this is it, right?
That's not it. I see a left outer join. I know SQL. I see left where top.
So these are the queries for each visual that it's showing. I think.
Okay.
I don't know. Right. Look at this. This is beautiful auto-generated SQL.
Oh man, that is a lot. It's like it's injecting a date, building its own table or something.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Holy smokes. Yeah. So not that it couldn't perform, right? Not that, because I'm like this master level DBA. I just want to let you know that, Adam. I just want to say that. Yep. So not that I couldn't make this fast if I wanted to. I just think we can probably take a better approach and minimizing what could be done.
A couple other things real quick on the direct query side. One of the things that you can do. So I was working with a customer where they've got 100% direct query.
Yeah.
And I will be honest, their data structure, and a lot of the customers we talk to where their data structure is not really optimized.
Yeah.
I've got a link to the guidance doc on direct query itself. So like updating your direct query model to be performant of what Power BI is going to expect. So star schemas are a big thing.
Yeah.
And then just making sure it's really keep it simple. Try and keep it as simple as you can. The more complexity you add to this, the worse, whether it's direct query or import.
Yeah.
But there are other tools and stuff that you can use inside of Power BI as well. In options, there's a section called query reduction. So that'll alter like how the slicers and filters interact. So it'll give you an apply button. Normally, when you interact with a slicer, it immediately starts updating all the visuals for that. It'll re-execute those queries on the database side. And so using these query reduction options, it'll allow you to make your selection and then hit apply before it actually goes and launches the query. The other thing you can do, and this is good for like even published to web reports as well, where you can edit the interactions of those visuals. Because by default, a slicer is going to update every visual on the canvas.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to be a little more targeted, so it's not just updating everything, right? So be a little more specific in what you're doing.
Can you show this option box? Because I think they added, because I was reading, I think they added some stuff here on this option, or at least one additional option, if I'm not mistaken. Boy, that's really small. They did. Look at the bottom. So there's a third option right here that's in preview where you can add a single apply button to the filter pane. So I'm guessing
specific to filters. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I select multiple things in the filter pane, I can select, and then click apply, and it sends everything at once.
Yeah, I hope like having that for the slicers would be good as well, but right now it's just for the filters. So if the slicers is something that you want as well, go to ideas.powerbi.com and vote that up. I know it exists out there. So
it's just baby steps, right? Baby steps.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
So yeah. So the other thing here that I want to point out is this reduce number of queries sent that's disable cross highlighting. So I said the edit interactions, by default, every visual interacts with every visual. This checkbox will reverse that, right? And so it'll actually say by default, none of the visuals interact with other visuals, and you manually have to then go edit interactions to allow that behavior. So that's something you can do from a direct
I
query
think if you're
perspective
doing
as well.
direct query, you may want to default to this because it'll force the report developer to go and make sure they're
Be thoughtful about it.
unless you know it's going to be on every page, right? It'll make the report developer be thoughtful and not just assume everything needs to interact. I like it. This is good stuff.
Another thing to consider too is the number of visuals on the canvas. We talked about one or more queries. So the more visuals you have on there, the more it's going to hit the database. It's going to be very chatty.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you can do is reduce the number of visuals, right? The largest report I've ever seen myself personally of what someone did was 120 visuals on the canvas. That was a live connection to an AS model.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah,
I remember this.
Yeah, that was insane.
But let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question? How long did it take to render that page?
40 seconds.
And there were how many visuals?
120.
Not bad.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
And so, but one of the things you can do here, like you can see, like I've got all these card visuals. So we did a video, and Chris Hamill, who's on the CAT team, he did a blog post on this as well. You can do some tricks where you can use like a matrix or a table visual to get the same look and feel, but it's not as many visuals. I think Chris told us there was one customer he was working with where they started out with 60 visuals, and through some techniques like the table matrix thing, or just some other things you can do, like baking static items into a background image. So you don't actually have visuals like text or image visuals on the canvas. I think he got it down to like 12 visuals, and it drastically improved performance of the report.
So because you said direct query will send one or more per visual, if I didn't have these 8 cards and I just had one matrix, that would be one or more for that individual matrix.
Potentially one for all of it.
As opposed to 8 for all these cards. That's good, man. I'm doing some research. I see you doing some good research. Maybe if we adopt some of these things, maybe we could look at potentially using some of our tables in direct query mode. Maybe. Yeah.
All right. So we've looked at direct query. We've looked at import. Patrick, it's the fans broke already. And so we need to, like, what can we do? Like we need to make progress and go forward on this. So what can we do?
Well, you told me about something, right? And I kind of jumped the gun on it a little bit. You told me about this thing called Composite Models. You were telling me about this. And I think this is interesting because I think you're combining both, right? You're taking the best of both worlds. You're taking, hey, I can import some stuff and I can direct query some stuff. So I'm not importing all of that data. You know, I can import the smaller sets maybe, and then I can direct query the larger sets. Maybe. Yeah. And so you can see in this image, this slide that Adam's showing right here, the lookup tables or the dimensions are being imported. And then some of the larger tables, we have those in direct query mode because we don't want Adam to wait. We want to give him as real-time data as possible. And so we realize, hey, we can refresh the product, the employee, and the date table really quick. So we can have a refresh going, pretty quickly during the day, but the direct query, we never have to refresh those.
Now, one reason why you may want to do that too is so you saw like in the report we have some slicers, right?
Yeah.
And those slicers are just going off of the dimension table. And so those slicers will be very quick and they won't actually hit the backend database because they're imported. Yeah.
And so we're talking about data warehousing, but if you don't have a data warehouse, something like this could really help because typically your data warehouse is loaded every night and you don't need to refresh you can refresh your Power BI model right after your data warehouse, loads. But if you're going against a data set or a database where the data is constantly changing, something like this, I can see where you'd need something like this.
Yep. All right. And then you can take this even a step further. Like, I don't know if you saw this thing called aggregation tables.
Yep, I did. But let me show you.
Yeah,
Go
before
ahead.
we do that,
Yeah.
let's talk about the aggregations, and we'll go look at those items.
Okay. Okay.
And there's a point I want to make also. I don't know if you can talk to this at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Explain what aggregations is.
Yep. And so basically you have these tables. And so let's say, remember that big fact online sales, that
Yeah.
could be our sales table right here that has a billion rows of data in it. Trying to get that imported is a challenge. You're already complaining and we're not quite up to a billion rows yet. And so instead of importing, that table is in direct query mode. And you can see from the wonderful legend on the slide, all the gray tables are in direct query mode and the blue tables are in import mode. But there's a special table called sales ag where we've changed the grain of the table itself. And so instead of going all the way down maybe to the transaction level, you can see here, maybe we're just aggregating the data up by year and city, which is going to drastically reduce the size of the number of rows in that table. And so sometimes we see it go from billions of rows, depending on the granularity, to millions of rows of data, even smaller sets than that, depending on how granular that aggregation table is. And so now if you construct the query like the one that we saw on the previous slide, that'll completely hit the in-memory cache. Now for this one,
oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah,
For this one, right? Yeah. So let's say we have a very similar model, but we introduce a table that is not, part of my aggregation. So in my sales ag, customer name is not included in my sales ag, and I issue that query to the backend database. It won't hit the cache, and now it's going to go back to the source, and it may hit those billions of rows. And then guess what? Adam's going to call me because he's going to be upset. He's going to be crying because the query is taking 10 seconds, right?
Because Patrick's database is slow.
Because in my database is returning a billion rows in 10 seconds. So he's complaining about it, but I get it, right? So it'll miss the cache. Yep. And so, okay, I see what you did here. All right. Yeah, I see what you did. All right. So I didn't share my screen because we need to talk about a few things. We need to talk about a few things here. Let me share my screen. And so let's get this guy out of the way and get that out of the way. Sorry. And so if we go to Power BI and we're going to go to the composite model first. And so
you're not sharing your screen.
Oh God, I always forget to click that button, share. Okay, before we show the report, I want to go over here to the diagram view.
Okay.
And so we'll zoom in on some things here. But what I want to show you is that when you set up your composite model, you get your tables, just the base composite model. What most people do is your tables are in a couple of different modes. And so to see the mode, you need to select the table. And then over here in properties, you click advanced. And you can see right here, I have this particular table in dual mode. And we'll talk about what that means, okay? But there's 3 types of modes that your tables could be in. We already talked about import, right?
Yep.
That was too slow for Adam. We talked about direct query. And then we'll talk about what dual means, okay? So in this particular model, I set everything, I think most of these are in dual mode, and then my big table here is in direct query. And the reason I set it in dual mode is because when I go out, if these tables aren't combined, right? If I'm not issuing a query that includes this fact online sales table, if it's just this table, it'll hit the cache, okay? But if I, do a aggregation on, let's say, my product table where it's product and, some sales amount, or something right here, it's got to go in direct query mode. And so if I put it in dual, it can actually issue that direct query back to the source. And now I'm, it'll handle it for me on the source. But it may be a little slow. All right, so I'm going to switch over to this report, Adam. And
so what you were looking at first, that was just composite models, right?
Yeah, this is just a composite model. No ags, nothing like that. This is just a base composite model. So I'm going to switch over to this report. And before I go, because I do this all the time, I'm going to click Performance Analyzer, and I'm going to click Start Recording. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over to our new page, and we'll let this run. And so see all the little ants running around. Yep. And so all of these visuals, I just copied your report because I'm not really good at creating reports. I just copied yours. And so you can see, right, this stuff is taking a long time. And Adam is not gonna, the people that's looking at this, they're not gonna be happy.
Look at that, 20 seconds on one.
22
seconds.
But you said, Patrick, something's going to hit the cache. That's what you told me. Things are going to hit the cache. Well, there's only one thing hitting the cache right now, and that's that slicer, because it's not mingled in with the fact table at all. All these other ones, if we expand them out, right? If we expand this out, I guess yeah. So you can see right there that it's both DAX and direct query, right? So this is what Power BI is doing in my database. It's sending that query off to my database because I'm in dual mode. Even though I'm in dual mode, I am getting this, for some of my dimensions. Where I'm getting this from is purely the fact table. You can see right here, here's my measures. And on this measure right here, I'll show you this measure if it'll allow me to show you this measure. Yeah, it's still thinking. Oh, there we go. And so this measure is just going directly, that's not going to zoom in fast enough, directly to the fact table. And so when it issues that query, it's going, hey, you're in direct query mode, go all the way back to the source, run my query for me, and then bring that data back. And my database just is taking a long time. It's taking 7 seconds. It's taking 7 seconds to do this. Nice. And so again, the optimizations not nice, but the optimizations that we talked about earlier, index views and indexing and things like that, it can help here. So Adam could actually export this out and send me this and go, Patrick, tune these queries up, because my report is slow. So he can just click export. It'll give me a JSON file. Using the tool like Dax Studio, I can import these in, and then I can look at all these server timings, right? Look at all this stuff, and then copy those SQL queries, go over to my database, run them, because I said I'm a master DBA. I'm going to run these, look at execution plans, decide if there's things I can do on the back end to make these faster.
And Jason's a good guy.
Jason's a good guy. Right.
Yeah.
So it's still slow. Okay. Adam's not happy. So let me ask you a question, Adam. When you design this report, you're just going to publish this out and people are going to consume this. People are just going to consume this report.
That's the idea of any report, right? No, I just made it for myself.
But what we can do, and you talked about this a little bit, so I can look at these query patterns in the DAX and I can go, okay, I see a theme in these patterns. And so what I can do based on those themes is start building out the second concept that you talked about, aggregations. I can start building aggregate tables and then try to figure out, okay, I built this aggregate. Now I need to make sure that Power BI is using that aggregate table. And so that is going to hit the cache. Okay. So let's see. I have a different model over here. Am I still sharing my screen?
You are.
No.
You
okay.
are.
All right. How are we on time?
We're good. Keep going.
All right. So I have another model here. Now I want to show this. I want to show first I'm going to start with the timings. I just want to start with the timings. Then we'll dig into this a little bit.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to go to view.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go to performance analyzer. This is the same report, right? There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is just what we want to call, optimizations. So we're going to click start recording.
Yep. Don't be like Adam and forget to hit start recording.
I almost did too.
I know.
And I click Control Sales. And here comes the visual cache is going to be there.
And just a reminder, the reason we started with the blank page is so that none of the caching is in place. So this is the raw timings of, wow, look at that.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's sort by, let's say total time. Let's just sort by total time.
Okay.
And do descending. And then, but what I want to do, Adam, is, did I keep the other one open? Yes, I did. So let's go over here, sort this one by total time. And descending. There's a few more visuals on this page, but that's okay. All right. And so you can see the sales amount, right? That's 42 seconds, right? 40 seconds just for the queries, right?
Wow.
If we go over here and then we go here, that's it right there. That's the one right there, right? What is it? 10 times? Look at that.
Oh,
look at that. What did I do?
We didn't even hit direct query there.
I didn't even hit direct query there, right?
Nice.
Even though, if we go over to the model, this model, you'll see that my big table.
For a second, I thought you had no relationships. I was like, wow, that's impressive too.
If we go over to my table, my big fact table, look at there.
Still direct query.
It's still direct query. But what we did was, we introduced these tables called aggregations. So you can see down here. Let's look at this one. Let's take and it's all pixelated. Hang on 1 second. That's all right.
You didn't zoom in on the model itself.
Let's do this though. I'm gonna zoom in on the model itself. And
There you
then
go.
we'll look at this one. We'll look at this guy right here, right? So what you can see is I have some additive values like sales and return amount and quantity and things like that. But I changed the grain from the transaction itself down to the date and the product, right? Which is going to significantly reduce the number of rows in that table. So when I actually do a refresh on it, it shouldn't take that long. And if you click on this table itself, you can see that the storage mode for my ag is import. It's always going to be import, okay? Because my ag is never going back to the source. Even if I mingle it with a dimension, I don't want that to ever go back to the source. And so I make it import. And then any dimension that's related to it, like my dim date, it'll be in dual mode
Yep.
because it may, if I miss the cache, it may go back to fact online sales, which is in direct query mode. But if it hits the cache, it can use everything in my cache because I'm in dual mode. And
Nice.
now that's why my queries are so fast. That's why
It's
they're so
amazing.
fast. And so it's not just amazing. It's insane amazing, Adam. I'm just going to say it's insane amazing. And guess what? I just read a doc and I learned how to do this. While you were doing all your direct query stuff, I already
Wow.
knew about this. So that's optimization 101. That's not 101, man. That's like 501. All right. Okay.
Maybe you could have spent that time and read up on how to index your database instead. So one thing I want to call it, like I said, Patrick and I work with large enterprise customers. We work with data at scale. Some of you may be sitting there going like, look, my data is just not that big.
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with any of this. And that may be
Yeah.
right. When you're working with small data, you can get away with a lot,
Yep.
right? Yeah. And probably you'll be able to just import it anyway and it'll be fine. You're not going to see a massive performance hit on that unless you're doing something really crazy with small data. I've actually, one of the larger models I've seen imported was over 1 billion rows imported, 100% import. And it was, they had to use incremental refresh, obviously, for doing that because it just took way too long to do a full refresh. And so that's something to think about. When we do get to scale, though, and we're talking about billions of rows, importing is not going to be an option there. And we need to start thinking about layering items to improve performance. So if you're doing 100% direct query, that's going to be a problem with that much data, unless,
Yep.
and you've got to really keep that data model really simple.
Yep.
And so look at these layering opportunities from, whether we're importing some of those aggregate summary tables, and then like if you're using Azure Synapse Analytics, the first layer will be that imported ag table. And then the second layer may be like a materialized view or a summary table on your data source,
Yeah.
right? And so in Azure Synapse Analytics, you can create materialized views. If your database, whatever you're using, doesn't support something like that, you can just create a summary table, right? It's just a cached table that has those aggregate results.
Yep.
That's part of your ETL process, and just update that.
Yeah.
And then the third layer would be the raw detail table, right? And as you go through those layers, you're going to see different performance as a result of hitting those. So ideally on those aggregation tables, you're going to want the majority of queries to hit that aggregate.
Yes.
So hopefully 90% or better.
Yeah.
So the majority of it should hit that, right? So
Yeah.
the base report is just this high level aggregate, and then people are going to want to drill down into those different layers. So one example I had was where the aggregate table was like, less than a second. So it was sub-second response time, which is what we expect. Then when we hit that materialized view, then it went between the 5 and 10-second range, and this was on billions of rows of data.
Gotcha.
And then in that materialized view, so we're hitting, that's effectively direct query against those materialized views. So we're hitting the database at that point.
Yeah.
And then when we hit the fact table, the big amount of data, so this is again billions of rows, that is I think I want to say between 10 and 16 seconds response time, which was really good. I've seen other where folks have implemented that, and on the direct query side, it was taking like a couple minutes to respond, and like that's not going to work. So yeah, that's something to consider. Now, go ahead.
No, so I talk to a lot of people and they go, well, Patrick, we still this won't work for us because our model, we don't have a data warehouse. We're using something like Hadoop or, we're storing in a big data system. You can absolutely do these things too. You don't need, and we're showing, kind of, I don't want to call it simple, but we're kind of oversimplifying it a little bit. There's other techniques that you can do when you set up your aggregations. In fact, I didn't even show the aggregation window. When you go here, and then you click on the ellipsis for the table and you say manage aggregations, there's things you would do in this dialog to, say, hey, I'm doing account rows and, these are the measures that I want to return. And so if there's relationships established between the tables that you want to aggregate by and the actual ag table, then you don't need to specify what we call these group by columns. And so but if those relationships don't exist, you can specify group by columns, and then it would automatically take advantage of it for you too. So kind of keeping it simple in this demo, but there's lots of documentation. There's videos out there that'll show you how to do those.
The other thing I'm going to add there too is composite models and aggregations are not a premium feature.
No,
right?
They're
so
not.
You can use that as just a regular pro type experience, right? So
remember when we found out about that?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. And so another thing is people will come back and go, well, Patrick, I have some people that's doing ad hoc reporting, but Adam said this earlier, right? We're trying to address the larger population of report consumers and people that's accessing that model. And if you have a small population of ad hoc users, there's some things you can do to monitor their activity and adjust your aggregations. Or if you have reports and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I set up my aggregation? There's tools like Dax Studio that you can use to try to figure out what those query patterns are so that you can build the aggregations. And so that's what I was doing, Adam, while you were talking. If you have the latest version of Power BI Desktop, external tools is there. I forget when external tools were
a couple
introduced.
Months ago.
And so you can
I've lost all sense of time, right? I think something was like last month and it was like 8 months ago.
I know, it's crazy. And so you can click on Dax Studio, it'll launch Dax Studio. And then if you turn on server timings, all queries, sorry, if you turn on all queries, and then you go back to your report, and where's my aggregation report? And with Performance Analyzer on, if you just click refresh visuals, it's kind of like a trace. It's kind of like I'm capturing a trace of all my queries that are coming through. And you see these little solid circles right here. Yeah. If the circle is solid, that means it's hitting the aggregation. If the circle is just clear, it's not hitting the aggregation. In my case, because I'm so good, all my my queries are hitting the aggregation. Wow. But let's pretend that it wasn't, right? Let's pretend that it wasn't. What I can do is I can double click on one of these. I thought I could. There we go. Hang on one second. I can double click on one of these. And now I have that actual DAX expression. If I turn on server timings, come on, baby. Yep. And I'm going to clear the cache on this. Okay. So you can turn on server timings. And if I run this, what Power BI will do for you after the query completes is you can go over here, and I just lost it. Let's run it again. So you'll see it'll say match not found. Okay, so right here, instead of saying match found, it'll say match not found. And then if you click on it, on this guy right here, it'll actually give you details and say, hey, this is the table that I miss. And then you can go back to your model, create the aggregate, and then run another test on this and then see. So it's kind of an iterative process, but there's a lot of insights here that'll help you be more proactive instead of just pushing it out and saying, okay, let me see what happens, So you can actually work in the data model with this tool to identify where your aggregations are hidden, where they're missing, and then do some things.
I remember a conversation I had with a customer where the data modeler and the DBA were both on the call, and the DBA was concerned because they're like, look, Power BI is really chatty. It's going to take down our database. And the data modeler, he made this comment because they were using ag tables. And he's like, look, if Power BI is too chatty, that's on me as the data modeler to go fix this and make sure it hits the ag.
That's right.
So that means I didn't do my job.
Yeah. And that's great, right? Yeah. That's great. But you got to have you got to have somebody that's committed, committed to it. You just can't say, I'm doing it and good luck, right? Somebody's got to be committed to this to this thing.
Yeah.
We have to work
So,
on it.
so one thing, Patrick, I saw someone made a comment, the auto close captioning, where the aggregation table, it called it aggravation table.
Oh, an aggravation table.
Thought that was funny. All righty.
One more thing
Okay.
before
All
we
right.
leave aggregations. So
All right.
in my model, I actually created the aggregations back at the source. Okay. I created the aggregations back at the source and I
So you
imported
created
them.
that summary table in the actual data warehouse or
Right.
database. Yep.
Yeah, it's actually a view, to be honest with you.
Yep.
It's just a select this column, this measure, and then I
Got
do a
it.
group by, right? That's what I did.
Yep. And then
If you don't, go
and then
ahead.
you just imported it, right? There wasn't anything special you did to pull it
Nope.
in.
There's nothing I did to pull it. I just
Yeah,
imported
you
that
just
table.
straight import.
Yep. If you don't have access to the source and your DBA is kind of like, look, I'm not doing this for you, you still can do it. You still can do aggregations because you can build the ag in Power Query. Power Query has some grouping options. If you know M, you can write some M to do it, but you can also do it there based on your fact table. You can build your own ags in Power Query. It can have an effect on your refreshes and things like that, but still you can do it. I've even seen people, and I'm not recommending this, Adam, I'm not recommending this, but I've seen people even do this in Dax. So I won't say you should do this in Dax, but I've seen it, maybe you're more comfortable there. Maybe people are more comfortable in Dax than in the query editor. Don't know why, because you can do most of it with the graphical user interface, but start at the source. If you can't do it in Power Query, and then I would probably say never do it in Dax. But hey,
just personal opinion, right?
Just a personal opinion. All right.
All right. Do you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
We'll cut
Thank
back
you.
over to
Thank you.
mine.
Because I always forget about stop sharing.
Yes. And then we'll. All right. So that is everything that we were going to talk about in this session. So I'm going to kick it over to Simon, who's our moderator, who's been looking at the questions to see if we've what we've got that we can help answer. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Simon.
Hey, how's
There
it
he
going?
is. Good.
So I haven't shared my video yet, but
okay.
I'm looking at the most popular question we have here, and it's from Shabnam W. I apologize if I haven't pronounced that right. But the question is, I recently found out once I enable incremental refresh and deploy the report to Power BI service, I can no longer download it back from the service. Not only that, but any other report that live connects to the data set can no longer be downloaded anymore. Any thoughts on this?
I didn't know the reports that's live connected couldn't be downloaded, Shabnam. I will have to look into that one.
So there's two things here. One is, so we already commented on the fact that if you use incremental refresh, you're not going to be able to download the PBIX anymore. And so that's partly why we mentioned to separate the report and the data model. But I think on the shared data set items, like there's an actual, I think there's an actual limitation there where if you're using a shared data set, you can't download the PBIX either. So,
right,
but it's easier on the report side. If your report is live connected, you can republish that. Yes, you can't re-download it, but you can republish if you do have the original Power BI desktop file. But if you don't have the original desktop file and the report's out there, you could still potentially edit the report in the service. But you do lose some of the capabilities right now that are there in Power BI desktop, specifically Performance Analyzer.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Kate.
Sorry.
Good one. Good one,
So the next question, or the next most popular question that we have, is from Emmanuel D.
Hello, Emmanuel.
And his question is, what is better to use a data warehouse between my OLTP database, ERP system, and Power BI, or define directly some views on the source in brackets OLTP DB to query from Power BI?
I hate to say this. I hate to give you the consultant answer, but I'm going to say it. It depends. It depends. I hate to say this. Obviously, if you can build a data warehouse and have that away from your operational system, your DBA will be extremely happy, or who's ever managing that ERP, because Power BI can be a little chatty, but if you don't have that resource and you're possibly importing and not, especially if you're not direct querying. I've seen people create views on top of their OLTP systems, and they coordinate with their DBA and say, hey, we're going to do some refreshes at night to pull a whole bunch of data in. What time slot can I do this where I'm not conflicting with other maintenance jobs and things you're doing on your operational database? If you can have that conversation and do something like that, maybe creating those views against your OLTP, and DBAs are cringing at me right now, right? They're saying, oh, don't say that, Patrick. But it's a conversation, because a data warehouse is a long-term and can be an expensive project. And if you're trying to get going with some analytics in your organization, I have personally done views on top of operational systems, but I was the DBA and the BI person. So, I knew what to do and I knew how to balance it. So just got to figure out a balance.
Yep. Going back to the it depends thing. So first, it's going to be, look what Patrick said. When is it actually refreshing, and how long is the refresh, and how much pressure is it putting on the database, right? Yeah. So those are going to be factors. The other thing is how many visuals. Like if we're doing direct query, I do not recommend doing direct query against an operational database, period. Because it's going to be chatty, and you don't want to impact production on the transactional database side. So definitely have some reporting database that you can go do that. Sometimes people will do that though, because they want, some of the reasons why they're doing direct query is that quote unquote real time or near real time. And so they may just go directly against the operational database, but just understand that it's chatty. It's going to add load onto the database. So talk with your DBA, have a strategy for what that is, test, and try and do some load testing, see what that's actually going to look like. And you may have to pivot depending on what you see.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's not strictly about the session, but it is a real popular question at the moment. Where do I get from James B? Where do I get one of those shirts? It is skyrocketing in popularity at the moment.
Yes, we get that every time we wear these. So these were shirts that were just handed out at a conference. In fact, I think Past Summit was one of those where they were handed out. Ignite's another one. So it's not something that I think you can go freely get. So I would say your next conference that you're at, hit up the Power BI booth and see if they've got one of these shirts. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Okay. So next one on the list, we have Justin L, who has put, if direct query introduces so many performance issues, how do you handle security and role-based data access when build Power BI reports?
Using import.
Import, sorry. Yeah. My understanding is that direct query utilizes the database security layer and import does not. How do you balance explicit permissions with performance?
So when you're doing import and refresh and you're defining that data source like through a gateway or whatever, you're going through that single user. So you're right. From the backend database perspective, you're not taking advantage of any security measures or restrictions that may be at the data layer. There are things you can do on the Power BI side, though. You can look at row level security and implement that inside of Power BI desktop and control it from that perspective. Sometimes I've seen where folks are challenged, though, because they're like, look, we've implemented all of that type of security and row level security at the database layer. We don't want to have to duplicate all of that on the Power BI side as well and have to manage it in both cases. So that's something you're going to have to balance. But if you are importing, the way that you can help restrict access to data is through row level security. And eventually, hopefully we get object level security as well that will allow you to implement that. So if you want to restrict like columns or tables, that is something that will be coming at some point.
Nice. Got nothing
Anything to add there?
No, that's perfect.
Right. Yeah, row level security. Go check that out.
Yeah, go check it out.
Okay, again, Thomas L has said, can you expand on the term chatty?
Yes, sorry about that. So chatty just meaning like, because we said each visual is going to have one or more queries to the database, right? And so if we're refreshing, you may just have like maybe just a handful of queries depending on how many tables you have. In direct query, though, let's take that example. I had the extreme example of the 120 visuals. That's 120 queries at a minimum per user that's hitting it. It could be more. And then if you multiply that by, hey, if you have 1,000 users hitting this, that's a lot of queries. So the chattiness meaning like we're hitting the database with a lot of queries. So you're going to see a lot of traffic back and forth to where it's gonna impact performance on the database side. So chatty just means there's a lot of queries, right? It's not a small subset of queries.
Paul T has said, per Emmanuel's question, what are the advantages of creating a database view rather than writing inline SQL queries in Power Query?
Oh boy. Do you want to give your spiel, Patrick, about
this? I wonder, do we know this Paul T? I wonder, do we know this? Anyway, no, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
So ideally, you want to push things back to the source as much as possible, or as far back as you can go. So Patrick talked about with the ag tables about, Dax query or creating a table from a Dax perspective versus shaping it in Power Query versus having a view in the database, right? Yeah. So sometimes you don't have access to the database, and so you can't create that view. If you do, create the view, right? Because you're pushing it, let the database do its thing. Yep. From a Power Query perspective, if you're going to shape and transform things in Power Query, using the UI, that's fine. Query folding, take advantage of that. The minute you use what's called a native query, so you're handwriting your own T-SQL statement because you don't think auto-generated SQL is the best SQL, which is probably true. The thing to understand is you break query folding at that point. So if you're putting your own native query in there, anything you do after that point will not get folded back into the query that's going back to the database. The only thing we send to the database is the query you handcrafted. So you can't take advantage of things like incremental refresh at that point because it won't fold. The other thing to realize is if you are going to do a native query and put in your own T-SQL statement, make sure all of the transformations you're doing are in that T-SQL statement. Do not do any transformations after that point because that will add significant overhead, both from a refresh perspective and otherwise.
Cool.
Anything else, Patrick?
No. The query folding was the thing that I was.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Cool.
Okay, so we have John S.
Yeah.
Will an aggregate table in Power BI apply RLS if the aggregation does not include a relationship to the table to which RLS is applied? In other words, could this proxy visual, non-visual totals?
Yeah, so I just actually did a presentation on this for a customer, and Marco Russo wrote a great blog post on this. So the first part of the question, you're absolutely, it will not apply. If the table that has a RLS, let's say it's a territory table, and you have RLS on the territory table, and you have a relationship to your main fact table, but not to the aggregate table, no row level security will apply to that table. And so, yes, you could use it as a proxy for visual, non-visual totals. And if you go read Marco's blog post about it, he kind of walks you through and how to set it up. So it's perfect. You can do like percentage of totals and things like that. So I can see all the aggregate data down to how I aggregate the data, but ignore, all the details in my fact table because the row level security would still apply to that main table. Yeah. Anything else, Adam?
No, that's great.
Yep.
Awesome. So the next one we have is from Eric V. Can you use aggregations with just import models, not composite models or direct query? I could see this being useful when we import large tables, but can get by with a much smaller aggregate most of the time. The most aggregation demos tie in composite models.
Yeah, go ahead.
So aggregations is a function of composite models, right? So it uses composite models to perform that operation. Yeah. Now, that being said, nothing stops you from, look, if you just want to have 100% import, you can have like a summary table that's imported, and you can have the detail table that's really big. Be 100% import. You're not using the aggregation feature inside of Power BI, but then you can use Dax to kind of switch based on what you're doing between the summary table and the detail table. I've seen that done with customers, and it can be very successful. Just understand that you're adding some of that switch capability into your Dax statements, which could affect performance. So you just got to verify that.
Yeah, because in the Dax, you're just basically checking like a cross filter, right? To what grain? If I'm at the grain of the ag, run the measure against the ag. If I'm beyond the grain of the ag, then you would go down to to the other detail table. It can be done, but like it's some work. It's some work behind it.
It's probably got a couple, probably time for another couple of questions.
Yep.
And so
yeah, we're not going to be able to get all the questions in. We'll get a few more in, or try to get a few more in. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter. We have our Twitter accounts listed on the slide. Happy to continue the conversation there.
A couple of these are good. I'm
right.
I'm gonna try to copy one of these.
All right, Simon, you got another one for us?
Yes, sure. So again, at the top of the list, we have JR, who said, if you were to give this session again, but focused on push data sets, would that be at the top of your list of topics?
So I'm push data sets is an interesting term. I have not personally seen anyone use the feature push data set inside of Power BI. Part of the reason for that is you're very limited on what you can do. This is more for like a streaming type scenario. I would actually say use a streaming data set over the push data set. I know there's scenarios where it's probably useful, but you're very limited. You can't do any of the advanced modeling things that we've talked about. So I don't know that I would ever do a session on that, just to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've probably got time for one last question.
Well,
so I don't know if you guys have looked at the questions and seen if there's one.
Is there one you like, Patrick? That
no. Go ahead. Go in the order. Okay, I copied the one I wanted.
So the next one we have is from Guru P, who says, how do we link two fact tables like fact order and fact delivery? User wants to see delivery numbers, date for order number.
The short answer to this is they have to share dimensions. If they share dimensions, then I can get measures from both fact and, or let's say date. Date is the most common one, right? Let's say I have a delivery date and an order date, and I want to, correlate the number of orders by the number of deliveries. If I relate both of those to the date, then I use that single date in a visual, and then I can bring both of those measures over, and now I'm essentially linking them together. That's the simplest way to do this. You can also think about denormalizing and bringing them together. I would not recommend that.
Okay.
All right.
I think we'll probably
we're at time.
Yeah, we're at time.
Alrighty.
I guess so. Adam, that's people should hit you up on Twitter if
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for taking time with us today. Hopefully you got value out of this session. And again, sorry we can't be face-to-face and just spend time together. We'll see you out on the interwebs.
Fill out your evaluation.
Yes.
Complete your evaluation. All right.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. We'll see you, everyone.